So welcome to today's Leadership Lounge. Sorry, one second, I'm just going to share my screen. This is episode 6 now, and today's session is all around the many faces of a team. So it's all focused around personality types, makeup of team, and what you need to think about when you're managing these different personalities and people, and how you kind of form those as a team. So we're going to be looking at, for June, we've got our new topics which were all launched, so many faces of a team this week. Then we go into how to kind of lead and change, and looking at a couple of frameworks and models for change management as well. And then we're going to go into the importance of self-awareness. So that's a guest spot from Chris Hatfield, who's going to host that session for us. And then we finish up the month with looking at unlocking potential. So coaching your teams and how to kind of host or hold the coaching role as well as the manager role. And then how to lead with emotional intelligence, not just IQ as well. So how are you aware of the emotional intelligence piece, and how to utilize that when you're managing different people. So that's what June looks like. It's all around the development of your teams, really. And that's the focus we wanted to get across today. So today's session, like I said, is all around the many faces of a team. So it's looking at personality types and the formations of your teams and what you need to consider. And we're joined today by 3 of our regional sales managers, so Matt, Bridgine and Gavin, who are going to talk to us about how they do it with their teams, both here in payment sense and historically what they've adapted to and used in the past as well. And I think these 3 are really great for this session because they manage very, very large teams with very, very diverse people in there and different personalities. So I think it's good for us to learn from them kind of how they approach it and what they do. So I'm just going to hand over to them. I'm going to stop sharing the screen and go through and ask them each of them to introduce themselves. So Matt, do you want to kick us off? Do you want to just introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you do?
Yes, good morning. I apologise for my beard situation. I made the mistake of deciding that when lockdown was launched, I was going to not shave until we came out of lockdown. I managed to get a couple of other people involved to I think David Lemon has opted out of his, Damien's still going, but yeah, so this isn't my my normal look, so I apologise. So at the moment I've got probably about 45 active sellers. My job role, I guess, within Payment Sense is to make sure that there's continual LTR, LTV growth month on month. My aim really is to help coach and organise and motivate the sales team through the communities, through the starter Champions League, and then hopefully into super sellers, and obviously aided and abetted by the field-based trainers. And quick shout out to those guys because they do a fantastic role. So geographically I cover quite a big area. I cover Wales, West Midlands, Southwest right down to Cornwall, and then the South Coast right across to Southampton. So geographically it's a big area. In terms of my story, I was in the leisure industry for 10 years, went into recruitment for a couple of years. I was sat in an office, not really enjoying myself. A friend of mine was working for NTL, which is now Virgin Media. He was knocking doors, residential. He said that they were looking for sales guys. So I went out with him for a couple of hours, thought, well, he's not doing anything I can't do. So left recruitment, went into that. Put 10 grand a year on my wages. Realised that this was what I wanted to do. I then progressed as an RSM within NTL Virgin Media. Left there, went into sales and membership, head of sales for David Lloyd Leisure Industry. And that's when I then left there and got into the card payment industry with HandyPay. So I was at HandyPay for 10, 11 years, 6 years as a seller, 5 years as an RSM. As a seller, I won Seller of the Year 3 years on the trot. As an RSM, I won RSM of the Year 2017. Got asked to help set up a new sales force with Global Payments. So took the leap from HandyPay to go and work for Global, which turned out to be an absolute nightmare. As we know, they're an incredibly slow-moving animal, and it was a painful process. And I got very, very lucky because I happened to be on LinkedIn one day, and I saw Steve Cummings' post looking for an RSM within Payment Sense. And since then, without a doubt, the best move I've ever made. So yeah, that's really my story so far.
Brilliant, thanks Matt. Hand it over to Bridgine then. Do you want to introduce yourself, Bridgine?
Yeah, hello, good morning. I'm Bridget Heenan. I've been with Payment Sense. This is now my 10th year. My story basically is, I suppose, way back in the day when I left school at 18, I got the job that my parents thought was a job for life with the civil service. I lasted 6 months, went to New York for a weekend and stayed 6 years. So I was an illegal alien in New York and Philadelphia. I then left there and while I was there, I worked mostly in bars, managing Irish bars. I then went to Heidelberg in Germany for 3 years, managed an Irish pub there, and then actually ended up working for the American Army, just working for them, not in it. Came back home in '89 and opened a restaurant. From there, I opened a takeaway pizza place, ran them for about 4 or 5 years. Then went into the courier business, going grand, and then 2008 came and the whole world collapsed. And then I came across Payment Sense and I joined them as a seller 10 years ago, I suppose, 2010, I suppose, somewhere around about then. And basically worked as a seller for 5 years, and then when Steve came on board and we were opening up the south of Ireland, I became an RSM in the south of Ireland. Done that for about just over a year. Then I was changed and put into John Selby's team and managed the north of Ireland. And then 3 years ago took over Scotland. So I've quite a big area. I have Scotland and the northeast of England, Newcastle direction, that sort of direction. It's very, very, what I love about it is it's very different every day because you deal with so many personalities. And, sort of, that's basically my story to date.
Great, thank you, B. That's really good. And lastly, Gavin, then, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Gavin, one of the RSMs as well. I've probably got one of the smallest areas, so I only manage South London, Brighton and Kent. I have a team of about 25 to 30 active sellers. I've been at Payment Sense for nearly 5.5 years now. I'm started as a seller myself. I actually only come here as a part-time job for myself, got hooked pretty quick because I was going to look for a graduate job, but decided to stay and work my way up. So I was promoted to a coach after 3 months, concession after a year, and then an RSM after 2 years. So I've been an RSM for 3.5 years now. Prior to that, I was traveling for 2 years where I got my first direct sales experience. So in Australia, I was doing door-to-door in Sydney and Perth. And prior to that, I got a business and finance degree. Yeah, that's it, short and sweet.
Brilliant, thank you, Gavin. Okay, cool. So I'm just going to go through as we normally do and just introduce a little bit around the topic that we're talking about today, and then we'll go into the full panel discussion. So just to kind of set the scene a bit and talk about, or kind of get us in the frame of mind for what we're talking about today. When we look at the kind of the makeup of a team, you have to consider a couple of different things. So not just personalities, but the generations in the workplace as well. So there's a lot of work and there's a lot of talk and there's a lot of research that's done into the different generations you have in the workplace. And I've put kind of the 3 main buckets that we have in Payment Sense. There are some in the one before Generation X, the baby boomers, but I've purposely not put those in here just for today because I don't think it really applies to what we're looking at, and that's a lot older generation, should I say, without insulting anyone. But basically, baby boomers are anyone that's born just after World War II. And the kind of key things for those guys are things to consider if they're in the workplace and in your teams is they were brought up in a time when there was none of the technology that we have today, and they're very traditional in their approach and their processes, and they're very much kind of set in stone with what they work in. So they work in a company. At that point, those people would have worked in a company for decades, so 20, 30 years of their working life spent with one company. And when we move into Generation X, so that's people born between 1965 to 1980, roughly, the Generation Xers, They value the work-life balance. So they're after those baby boomers who came out of the Second World War, and they were more kind of looking at their work-life balance and how to get the best of both and have that time with the family. So annual leave is a big thing for them, and having that ability to go on holiday, whether in the country or abroad. So they want to have that flexibility. Childcare as well. They're also probably the first generation that were more comfortable with being individualistic and being able to kind of, well, I suppose that's the generation where you started to see divorce rates going up and single parent families and things like that. So again, they need to have that flexibility, but they're quite flexible as people as well. They're relatively comfortable with technology. So in their working life, technology has been introduced and they've started using it. So they get a grasp of technology. You then move into your millennials. So they're people sort of born between 1981 to 2000. And millennials are a lot more tech savvy. I fall into that category. Your technology was introduced to you from a very young age, so you started to get it. So I think mine was kind of as I was moving into secondary school was when we started to get the internet and computers and things like that. So they're a bit more tech savvy. They understand how to use different technologies. They have the latest gadgets or whatever. They seem to adapt quite well to it. Millennials are very much feedback seeking. So they constantly want to improve, and they're very ambitious, and they want to always kind of be on the top of their game as well. They're very family centric, so a bit like Generation Xers, where they kind of value that work-life balance. It's the same for the millennials as well. They're very much achievement orientated. So a lot of the time you'll find that there's this whole concept or what people think is around millennials always want to grow and do better and go on to the next job. So they want the next, whether it's promotion or whether it's the next role, but they're all very much about achieving a lot in their life and kind of hitting their goals and their bucket list and things like that. But they're also very team orientated as well. So different to Generation Xers who kind of look at themselves and what they need to do. Millennials are all about working in a team and driving forward together. And this is a generalization. I'm not saying this is for everyone, by the way, but this is more a way to kind of break it up and have a look at the age groups that you've got in your teams and perhaps things you need to consider about their characteristics and the generations they're brought up in. And then your later ones, which is kind of 2001 onwards, are your Generation Z. So they're the ones that are now entering into the workplace and coming into it. And they are what we call technologically advanced. So it's not tech savvy, it's advanced because they haven't known a life without technology. They've always had it in their grasp. They've had it throughout school when they've been educated. They've had it all the way through the short time that they've been in the workplace as well. And they're very much about digesting information really, really quickly. So they scroll for hours on the phone. We all do it, I think, to an extent. We go on there and we scroll through from information, but for them, that's the norm. They've never known a life without it. So they can absorb vast amounts of information, and they're very visual with it as well, which is why we have a lot of machine learning now. We have videos, we have social media. They read articles all the time online. They're always on BBC News app or whatever it is. They've got all of this sort of vast amounts of data all the time and information all the time. And like I said, they're very visual as well in the way that they process things, and they want to marketing, for example, actually now sort of not just our marketing team, I'm talking in general, marketing now has this kind of big concept of being really, really visual with everything they do because it appeals to the Generation Z, and they always kind of focus things around that piece as well. And they're very independent and autonomous as well. So they work very independently. You have a lot more kind of young people now becoming entrepreneurs. They're not waiting to have a career and then taking that jump. They do it from school or they do it from university and things. And they're very much about having that independence and be able to do things for themselves as well. So that's one aspect that we have to kind of think about in the workplace is the generational gaps that we might have within our teams. And it's a good way to kind of start assessing and having a look in, right, how do I think mine's made up of? What kind of values do they have, or what kind of cultural aspects do they have that they use in the workplace and that I've observed myself as a manager? And then the second thing that we should be looking at, and we're going to talk about more today, is personality types. So how many personalities do you have in your team? Have you ever stopped and thought about it? What's everyone's personality like? So we've talked a lot about strengths and weaknesses in teams and understanding motivators, but have you actually thought about them as a person and what they are? And there's a good way to think about it, and there's a lot of personality profiling tools that you can use. I've linked some in the resources at the end of this session, but if you haven't ever done it, think about it. But if not, here's some questions to just get you started, and this is based on the Myers-Briggs personality testing. But are they introverted or extrovert? So are they quiet? Do they like working on their own and they're not fussed around having people around them? Or are they a bit less social? Or are they really extrovert and they love being around people, socializing, being the center of attention, being really loud? What kind of personality are they in that sense? Do they focus on basic information? So they sensing the information first and taking just basic information, taking it at face value? Or do they interpret and add meaning to it? So is there a lot of intuitiveness about them? And do they just take a snippet and then work out what they need to do in order to take that forward and add meaning and add value, I suppose, ultimately as well? Do they prefer to look at logic and consistency? So they're very much about logical approaches to things. To some point, you might even say a bit OCD with some things as well. It's important to recognize that with people and how they work with that. Or do they look at more how people are feeling and what the circumstance is and what we should do based on those feelings? So how do they approach different projects or different processes? Do they make concrete decisions? So they're quite quick to make decisions. So they judge quite quickly a scenario or a person or a system? Or are they very open to new information and options? Do they perceive it first and decide, actually, we need to consider these different levers or different things that are going to impact it first as well? So just asking yourself, how many personalities do you have in your team, and just kind of assessing how people are as a person will help you kind of then manage expectations with them, manage them as their manager, but also help them integrate into the team as well. And it's always quite nice as well to think about having different personalities on the team as well. So a bit like what we say with strengths, and having different strengths with people, so that you've kind of got the experts or people that are really strong in one area and can help others as well. And just making sure you get those, it's kind of a bit like a jigsaw puzzle, but making sure that you kind of get the right fit for everyone as well. So for you guys there, managing personalities and managing involves you managing yourself. And we're going to talk a lot more about this in the panel discussion in a moment, just the key points to really think about and what we're going to talk about in a bit more detail. But it's having self-awareness for yourself. So know your own biases with people as well. You don't have to like the people that you work with, but you do have to work with them and get on with them. So you need to kind of understand what holds you back from liking people or from being able to work with people, and understand kind of, do you ever sort of say categorically, no, I don't want this type of person or this type of person because this doesn't work for me? And is that flexible? Just reassess that every now and again and say, actually, should I still be thinking in that way? Or am I going to get an added benefit to the team by changing my perception of that or changing my thought process behind that? Always build a relationship. So like I said, you don't have to like them, but you do have to manage them and have a good relationship. So build that relationship with them, establishing a rapport with them, get to know a little bit about them. You don't have to know the ins and outs of their lives, but it's nice just to be able to remember names of partners or pets or kind of something that's important to them as well. And just by picking up on those hints and those kind of cues, I suppose, you actually establish a really good rapport with your team, and you need that in order for them to communicate effectively with you and for them to feel comfortable being able to come to you as well. So it's as much for you working with a good relationship as it is for them as well. Understand their motivations. So we did a session a few weeks back where we talked about intrinsic and extrinsic motivations and what helps people kind of do well in their job and motivates them to perform better. So really take that time as well. So not just establishing a relationship, but understanding how they work and how they work effectively as well, what motivates them, and then build to that as well. Diffuse friction and foster engagement. Always be aware of how the team is working together. I can't stress that enough. I've had it in the past in my team where people don't get on in the team, and it can cause some real friction in the team and make it very hard for the team to move forward and move past it. And ultimately, if it doesn't get addressed, you're likely to lose one of them. And if they're worth it for your team, you're not going to want to get into that situation. So always diffuse any friction and always think about kind of projects that can help them work together as a team and how you can get them working together on different things. Even if their role is completely separate, there will be an aspect or some point in their career where they're going to need to work with other people, whether it's stakeholder engagement or whether it's actually working on the project together. It's worth just kind of working out, right, how can we encourage more of that as well? And empathize and listen. I think you're always told that as a people manager. Be approachable, be available to them. Again, that comes from the things at the beginning around being self-aware of you and your own biases and of how you behave, and then building that relationship with them as well. Resolve conflict immediately, address issues. Too often people kind of let something happen, don't address it, and then it keeps happening and building up, and it's never resolved, or it's resolved too late when it's just too far gone. So always give feedback immediately and always address any issues immediately. It doesn't have to be this kind of aggressive, authoritative stance. You don't need to go in all guns blazing, but you do need to address it. So just say, hey, I've noticed that this X, Y, Z has happened. It didn't make me feel too comfortable, or I think the impact that that's had on other people in the team is X. Let's talk about that. Is there any way we can kind of avoid that going forward? Just a real simple upfront conversation. And the last thing is, don't take things personally. Keep it professional. It's all about your professional life. Not everyone has to like their manager all the time. There's always going to be scenarios. You've probably had it yourselves where you felt angry or annoyed with your own managers, but it's nothing personal against them, and it's nothing personal against you guys as well. So just kind of keep in mind that it's all professional. It's going to happen. There's going to be decisions you have to make that people don't like, but you just have to kind of keep pushing forward and know that it's for the greater good, and there's better things to come. So that's where we are with kind of introducing the concept. So we're going to look at that team makeup now with our speakers today, our panelists, and we're going to talk through just a few kind of best practices, hints, tips, and things that they've come across in their careers as well. So I'm going to take the first question over to Matt. You've obviously talked there about your career, and you've been in people management for quite a while. So Matt, can you take us back to when you first started managing people, and what the biggest lesson was that you learned around kind of the personalities you were managing?
Yeah, it's interesting you touched on all the personality types and things, because if you Google how many personality types there are, you get an answer ranging between 4 and 16. So it's very, very difficult to sometimes work out different types of personality. I think you touched on it there. For me, the main lesson I've always learned is to manage people as individuals. I learned early on that some people, certainly when I was in the leisure industry, there was one particular guy, he needed a rollicking every month to keep him going and to keep him doing what he should be doing. And obviously other people will need, an arm around the shoulder and a bit more coaxing. I think something else I learned quite early on as well was to not use negative language and sort of more challenging language, especially in the sales industry. So instead of kind of saying to somebody, you really need to increase your LTR if you want to get into Champions League, by rephrasing that in such a way and saying, if you focus this week on getting 5 more business opportunities, not only will it increase your earning potential, but it will also increase your chances of getting into Champions League. So kind of changing that language around has always helped. You also touch on it as well with personalities. Work is no different from life. But if you're in a social situation and you come across somebody that you don't like their personality, you can walk away from them. In a work situation, you can't do that. So you've got to manage it as best you can. But definitely, main bit of advice would be, don't take things personally. Somebody might have a lot of personal issues going on in the background, which might be cause them to react in a certain way, especially with everything that's going on at the moment. It's difficult to gauge exactly what's going on in people's lives at the moment. But personal issues can affect the way people talk to you. So don't take anything, or don't take everything that people say to you, personally. Yeah,
I think that's a big one. And I like what you say there about turning the negatives into the positives, because if you speak in a negative way, you're going to be met with a negative reaction. Yeah. Right? So you need to just change that language. I think that's really useful. Good, thank you, Matt. So same question to you, Gavin. What have you learned around kind of managing personalities as well with your teams? What have been the biggest lessons that you've taken?
Okay, so Payment Centre is really my first real management experience. And so the team I took over was about 30 people. So I was kind of thrown in the deep end with so many different personalities, and everyone was virtually 20 years older than me. So there was this young guy coming in, and if people remember me back 3.5 years ago, I was 26 and I probably looked about 20 years old. So the things I learned very quickly was I need to get the people to buy into me very quick. Managing them differently, exactly like Matt said. So I need to understand their motivators very quick, so I could have those different conversations with them to get them to buy into me, to understand that I was there to help them get to where they want to be. But yeah, the personalities, sorry, got confused there. So yeah, it's just basically the personalities. It's just treat everyone different and make sure I understand what they want from Payment Centre and their career, and then just reflect back on that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I suppose you've got that challenge, like you said, like where people are 20 years older than you than on average. So you're a different generation. If we think back to that first slide there, like a completely different generation where you're very tech savvy and you know all of that. And then you're working with people that perhaps aren't or haven't had that kind of exposure as well. So I suppose that's probably a good way that you could get that buy-in, right?
Yeah, definitely. And for me helping them get to where they want to get to, and showing that I've done it myself, because I started as a seller myself, so I can talk about my journey through Payment Sense and where they can get to using the people within my team, which massively helps.
Yeah, establish that credibility. Okay, cool. Thanks for that, Gavin. So Bridgine, for you, what was your biggest lessons with people management?
Basically, what the other guys have said, it's all about sort of learning the different personalities, and there's some people you need to cajole, there's other people that you do need a bit of a, you need to give a good talking to now and again. And I actually found the best thing was to spend a bit of time finding out what they want, because there ain't any point in me trying to drive them somewhere they don't want to be. So it's very important to know what their expectations are, and then trying to get them to their expectations. I also found very helpful that to build rapport with them. So what I would tend to do is during conversation make notes, so next time I'd phone them and be talking about something, if they'd mentioned the kid was playing football or they got a new dog, I would ask a question about whatever and it's it shows that to you that they are more than a number. I also found that it's to be a bit self-deprecating works a lot. I mean, like sort of, I would always say to them, like, I'm the average 5'8". If I can do this, anybody can do it. But I think the bottom line is that to work out that they actually want to work. As I always, and set realistic expectations. So I mean, if at a course when newbies come on, obviously with advertising and whatever, we tell them, recruitment can be a bit, let's say, a bit optimistic, and so you need to bring them back into reality and tell them, this isn't, a get-rich-quick scheme. It is a get-rich scheme, but you got to work at it. I always say to them, look, at the end of the day, as long as you're not lazy and you get out of bed every morning, we can work with you. But if you're lazy, just keep on going out the door and be coming back, because if you don't get out of bed in the morning, I can't do anything to help you.
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense. So kind of just establishing a good rapport with them is good.
Yeah.
And like I said, I like the idea of what do they want? Like, what is it that they need from you as their manager as well? And that's a huge one to take from them as well. It's not just about what you want for the team. It's about them, because they're the ones that are going to help you get there.
Yeah, it's also important because you'll find that you do have people who are lone wolves and like to go and do their own thing. So, I mean, I would always tend to say to them, I'm here if you need help. So let them come to me rather than, I mean, I do dip in it, keep in contact with them and, have a road off whereby I would call them, but I wouldn't be phoning them every day or WhatsApping them every day. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Because at the end of the day, they're adults. And if they can't get out and motivate themselves, I'm not going to put that into them. There has to be something in them to start. I don't think the experience in sales is as important. I would be more in the camp of if they have some sort of entrepreneurial, something entrepreneurial about them, and that to me is more important than sales, because you find a lot of people who come from a sales background aren't actually salespeople, they're account managers, so they don't actually go and sell to people. Whereas entrepreneurial people have had to talk to people to get customers, so they would be better. The other thing I would say, talking about your generation things, the one thing I find about this generation, the tech savvy one, I find them to be lacking in the conversational skills, and I find that they then find that difficult going out and cold calling, because they're not great at conversation skills and getting conversation going.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah, I suppose where they're kind of so ingrained in communication online, it's
all
face to face.
Yeah.
So you have to think, I suppose, in your roles about having people that can do both. That are a fintech.
Yeah, because there's some people come along and they know all the tech,
yeah,
but useless at sales, and then you have other people who are totally brilliant at sales but have no tech.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay, so sticking with you, Bridget, obviously you talked there about kind of setting expectations and building a rapport. When you have a new starter join your team, and you guys have new starters join your team quite often, as we know, how do you kind of get buy-in from them then? So what would, like, if you were to advise any of the other people managers on the call today, how would you, what would you say are the kind of top tips for getting that buy-in from them? What do you do?
Well, what you find with our role is that, I mean, at the end of the day, they're all there to make money. So I find that it's very, the best thing is to tell them my experience, because obviously I came in as a salesperson. I came in at a stage when basically, you know, I was in court for repossession of my house. So there's nobody has a more of a hard luck story than I have. I've walked every mile I've walked. I've you know, I've bullshitted everything they're going to bullshit me. And I just be totally realistic with them and sort of say, you know, it's up to you. And I think if you do that, and if you're really honest and realistic with them, that they buy in the honesty. And then the important thing is that you be honest with them. Don't promise what you can't deliver. And, you know, I have a saying, you know, if you meet me halfway, I'll meet you more than halfway. And, you know, and obviously it doesn't always work, because sometimes I won't meet you halfway, and then you just have to, you know, you can't waste time on people who want to be handheld all the time, you know?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think you're right. And I think that's a really good point about the honesty and transparency. We've talked about that in the last few episodes quite a lot, actually, and how valuable it is, and how much it sets the right tone for the relationship as well, because you're going to expect people in your team to be honest and transparent with you as well. And if you're not kind of living and breathing that value, how can you expect that to be reciprocated? So yeah, I think that's a really great.
You always find when you start that you have to use a lot of carrot.
Yes.
Especially in a self-employed role, we don't really have much of a stick. Yeah. So it is all about carrot, carrot, carrot. But what I've found is there's a tipping point where you get them, and where they're starting to make money on a very regular basis, and you've delivered on all that you've promised, and then they tip over to where they're making 4 or 5K a month and growing, and then that's when the payback comes, because they've now bought into you, into me, and then like sort of literally you can go ask them to do backwards somersaults down a high street, and they'll do it for you because they have that loyalty to you.
Yeah.
You only get that if you deliver on the promises.
Agree.
That's how what I can use then. What I use then is those people that have brought along, and I will ask them at some stage down the line, if I have somebody with potential coming through, will you do me a favour? Could you mentor him for a couple of weeks for me?
Yeah.
And I get that buy back in there as well.
Yeah, so you can utilise their skill sets.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. All right, so we've talked there a lot about values, so I'm going to flip over to Matt then for the next question. So obviously, Matt, you've had your people management here and in your previous businesses as well. What sort of values do you try to instill in your team, and how do you make sure you deliver on it as well?
Yeah, just going back to Brigine's point, I think that's one of the reasons why I never became a self-employed seller. I was only employed because I didn't really like carrots. But so I guess I've always tried to instill honesty, trust and commitment. I've taken over sort of new sales teams on 2 or 3 occasions. And I've always said, you know, I need them to be honest with me, and I'll be honest with them. I expect it, you know, to be reciprocated. Trust is a big part, and they need to know that if they say something to me, either personally or to do with their work, their home life, that it will be said in confidence and kept in confidence. And also the main thing, I guess, as well, is commitment. I'll give them commitment as long as I get commitment back from them. The way I've done it in the past with taking on the new sales team is I've sort of picked off the top performers and met up with them face to face. A little bit of sort of divide and conquer, I guess, but got those guys on board. Next stage to that is really trying to then set up a team meeting. My first team meeting at Payment Sense was an interesting one, because obviously I think I was the first RSM to be recruited externally, so nobody knew me or had heard of me. So my first Payment Sense meeting, when I had a team meeting, I think it was in Birmingham, was quite interesting, because I had about 40 people turned up, and I felt a little bit like the new animal at the zoo. So I think everybody was coming in to kind of see what was going on and who I was. but I think if I can show that I'm honest, trustworthy, and committed to the cause, then people tend to get on board with you. But one of the main things is if you say you're going to do something, make sure you do it, and then you get that credibility from there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think trust is a really good point to say, and that keeping that confidence of the people that you manage is crucial, right? Because no one wants to have a manager that then goes and tells people their business or what's happening with them. And I think sometimes we often forget that. We can get too carried away with conversations with our friends at work and forget actually that's a really crucial thing to keep.
Yeah, but it's difficult. You take on a new team. There could be sort of 40, 50 people. They've never heard of you, or they don't really know anything about you. They don't know your background. But for me, a big part of it, certainly my first team meeting, was getting a little bit of credibility across to them. The fact that I've been in the industry for 12 years, I didn't know what I was talking about because they didn't have a clue who I was. And over a period of time as well, you might have some of the people who you don't get on with or don't like you. But it's similar, I guess, to managing a football team. Once you're in that role and the recruitment comes in, those people only know you as their manager. So you kind of tend to work a little bit, things as you progress over the months, things do get a little bit easier in that respect.
Yeah, you're right. Team dynamics change, which actually moves us beautifully into the next question for Gavin. So Gavin, we talked there about credibility, and you've already said that you kind of worked your way up in Payment Sense. You're now managing, or you took over 30 people that perhaps you already knew to some extent, some of those people, but never as a manager. So how do you kind of get that buy-in from them? What did you do, and how did you make sure you didn't break any of the good relationships that you had by becoming the manager of the team?
So again, it's similar to what the other guys was saying. Given my story at Payment Sense so far, because most of the people who I took over wasn't here before me, so I worked my way up, and they've seen the success I was doing before, and so it's getting them to buy into that. It's also the fact that they all know I'm so competitive. Anything I'm doing is to try and make sure we're on top. And most of my guys that I've taken over, that was people that I've built friendship with. Or got the thing is they're all very competitive too, so we're all on the same level. So it's again getting them buy-in, me being loyal and trustworthy to them, and being completely honest with them. Most of the stuff when we go through changes things, I'm always giving them the business reason why. I'm keeping them up to date on what's happening, and just ensuring they know everything I'm doing as a sales manager is helping them get to where they want to be, which in turn helps me get to where I want to be and help us get to the top. Sorry. So yeah, that's basically it.
That makes sense. Yeah, so creating some vision as well for them. Yes, this is what's in it for you, but this is what's in it for us longer term and for the business. And yeah, creating that vision of where you need them to go as well.
Yeah, that helps me being pretty friendly with a lot of them as well, because I know what they want in life, in their personal life and things. So the conversations I'm having with them, I can gear it towards where they're trying to get to. So every person I'm speaking to, I'm having a different conversation about their different motivators, wherever they're trying to get to. So me getting to know them more personally helps me with that conversation, which then helps them get to where they want to.
Which is great. Yeah, it goes back to what we were saying. Understand their motivations, build a relationship with them. Don't just know their name, know everything, or not everything, but know enough about them to pick up on it and to kind of utilize that information as you have your conversations. Brilliant. Okay, cool. So the next question that I've got for you guys, I'll put it over to Bridgine first. From time to time, you guys have to have difficult conversations with people. So whether that's around behaviour or conduct or something that's happened. And I think quite often people managers, especially when you're new to a management role, it's quite hard to have those difficult conversations. But how do you approach that? What do you do? How do you kind of navigate that conversation?
Well, basically the conversations that we would need to have are more to do around with probably, you get a complaint from customer services or sales support that they've been a wee bit sharp on the phone, or they write a wee bit of a sharp email or throw their toys out of the pram. And to an extent, because I was a seller, I totally understand their frustrations, because they're dealing with people in employed positions and our guys are self-employed. So, they see any sort of a hold up as taking money out of their pocket. So you've got to sort of come from a, their point of view. But what I try to do with them is sort of put the spin on it and say, look, guys, you've got to think about who you're talking to, right? Put yourself in their shoes. For instance, like if you get on and you give somebody bad manners on the phone, do you think that gets your application to the top of the list? Well, if I was answering your call, you'd be at the bottom of the, it'd be right down to the bottom of the pile. So help yourself by being more pleasant to people. That's how I get around that one. Sometimes you'll have people who'll be a wee bit, what would you say, a wee bit bitchy on the WhatsApp group or whatever, and you have to really tackle them and say them, like there was no need for that, or you don't know what's going on in that other person's life, so don't be so judgmental. And basically, people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, and just sort of try to get them all to just be more. I think respect is basically the word we're looking, is that they respect everybody they deal with and treat people that they deal with in the way that they want to be treated themselves. And that normally works. And the only other thing you have after that is, if you find somebody who's being dishonest with the company, as in, doing dud deals or whatever, at the end of the day, you just sort of have to tell them, basically what it is, and it's not acceptable, and just get rid of them,
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think you hit the nail on the head there with respect. I think we need to, as people managers, kind of think to how we'd want a situation to be dealt with and how we'd expect our managers to deal with it with us, even if it is a difficult conversation or we've done something wrong, and then show that same respect to the people in your team as well. You're going to get a lot better reaction to it. And I think Matt's point earlier on around changing that negative language to positive. It's not always easy when you're having a difficult conversation, don't get me wrong. You don't want to be super positive that they don't get the message, but just not being insulting and not being aggressive, I suppose, in your approach as well, right?
Yeah, basically that to have manners. When they speak to people, say please and thank you, and just stuff that they probably should have learned when they were 3 and 4 year olds,
Yeah, we're all adults. Okay, cool. So Gavin, have you got anything to add to that one? How do you kind of approach a difficult conversation?
Yeah, so with my team, I set the boundaries pretty quick from the beginning. Like, one of the things I absolutely hate is complaints. So my guys from all of our team meetings and everything know that I don't want to see any complaints coming through whatsoever. So because we've got those boundaries to begin with, whenever any come through or I have to have those difficult conversations, it's not that difficult because they know what I'm expecting from them, and they know I don't want to be seeing these things. So I just go straight to them, hit the nail on the head straight away, and basically have it out with them and sort the problems out there and then, and try and avoid it happening again.
Yeah, so it goes back to that immediate conversation, doesn't it, that we talked about in the last slide, around just address it directly, and like you said, set expectations to begin with, and then it shouldn't be a shocker if anything goes against that expectation as well. I like that. Okay, so Matt, over to you. Anything that you would add to that?
I guess what you need to do is sort of twofold, really. You need to find out what's happened to cause that conflict. Explain to the person that you're dealing with, the impact that what they've done or said has caused. So you need to A, resolve the issue that's caused it, but B, really just make sure that they're aware of the impact of how they've worded or how they've said something to somebody, and the impact that it can have on somebody. The only thing I would add is on occasion, not so much with Payment Sense, but in the past, I've tended to sort of follow it up with an email, just outlining our conversation, just so that you can keep sort of record or track of any trends. So that if one particular person is constantly having a go at another department, then you've got copies of it to be able to follow up on.
Yeah, agree. Following up, just basic summary, like you said, it's an easy thing. Hey, just as we discussed, just want to follow up with this. And most people get the gist of why we're doing that as well, and why we want to follow up with them. Okay, so sticking with you, Matt, then. So in the opposite direction, you not just looking at kind of difficult conversations, how do you also kind of check in on the person and their well-being and how their happiness in the role as well? How do you do that?
Yeah, the wellness side of things, I guess, that can be a little bit tricky, especially how remote we are geographically, etc., etc. Head office do some fantastic work on that front, and I tend to try and, if there's anything I can send on, there was an email came out this morning with some stuff on the fitness and mindfulness schedule, so I tend to forward that on. And we also don't tend to hear about sort of any issues until sometimes it's after the event, which can be difficult. You tend to know the people you speak to on a regular basis or communicate on a regular basis. So I know in the past, if you suddenly think, oh, I haven't heard from X for a while, pick up the phone and find out that there's something going on in the background. So it really is just a case of trying to message people, ring individuals. How's it going? How's work? How's life? How's, you know, especially in this situation we're in at the moment, it's a lot more communication around how are things, how are the family, how's it going, how are you finding lockdown, etc. But it is a tricky one, certainly with the geographics that are involved. But I think it's something that we're a bit more aware of, certainly in the last 6 months, to reach out to people and just check up that everybody is doing okay.
Yeah, you're right. I think this whole situation has kind of really prompted people to focus on well-being. There's a lot more that people are doing to kind of have those conversations, aren't they? And I think you're right. Like, just notice patterns. If you notice that someone normally calls you once a week and you haven't heard from them for a couple of weeks, just reach out. Even if they don't answer the phone, drop them a text message and just say, I'm just checking in to see if everything's all right. And people will share with you if they want to share with you. And if they don't, fair enough. You just have to let them come in their own time, right? Yeah,
and that's the point, isn't it? Sometimes you can have you like to think that you've got the relationship with the person that they can open up to you, but there's a lot of people who don't want to share their what's going on in their family life and their background, which is completely understandable and fine. So it's not always as easy to find out what is going on, if anything is going on.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, so Bridgine, how about you then? How do you check in on that with your team?
Pretty much what Matt says, it's sort of basically having those conversations, and if you've built that rapport with them to start with, you'll know what's going on in their life, and you do notice differences in people who sort of go to ground, and you sort of go phone them up and what's wrong with them, and like that. I mean, I had an experience there over this last 3 months where one of my guys' father was dying, and it actually sort of was very similar to my own mother's dying. So I was able to talk, with him, say to him, like, I'm here 24/7. Anything you need to talk through my experience and what way we as a family dealt. And he found that very helpful. So I think it's just all about bringing, your own life experience to them and sort of being as helpful and just basically being there for them. And at the end of the day, the other thing is that if they don't talk to you, there's not really a lot you can do if somebody doesn't want to talk to you, but you just try to help those who reach out to you.
Yeah, you're right. It's about empathizing with them. It's about listening to them. It's about showing them sympathy as well if they're going through something like that as well. And yeah, like you said, if people don't want to talk, they don't want to talk. That's fine as well. But you need to kind of get that right balance, and you get that by understanding what kind of person they are. So it could, again, going back, it could be that they're introverted and therefore they don't like talking about that kind of thing and talking about how they're feeling with it. Okay, all right. So we've got a question that's come in from Steve to all three of you. So we'll start with Gavin, if you want to answer this one to start with. So moving into the new world, we'll be recruiting a higher volume of newbies into the business with the expectation of obviously fast growth from the business. What's your strategy in getting the newbies to stick and get performing fast with the new product?
Okay, so communication is going to be key with the new starts. I need to kind of sell them the journey of Payment Sense, what's coming ahead, what opportunities they've got, and also using my previous people in my team, for example, Tim, and kind of use these as poster boys so they can see if they do work hard at Payment Sense, that they can achieve some good things, and just selling the future things we've got coming. What else was getting newbies to stick? I mean, yeah, communication. So whether they're self-employed, it's so easy for them just to drift off if they're not communicating with myself or the business. So I think it's important for me and the business to keep these guys in constant contact, keep them going, and yeah, using the poster boys to push and give them a vision.
Yeah, that makes sense. Communication is a key one. You guys have to do a lot of it. For people that don't know, and I think I mentioned this on a webinar a few weeks ago, but I observed some of the RSMs, including Bridgine and Gavin. And Gavin once had 2,994 WhatsApps in a week, which is just incredible. So he's quite good at communicating. He's answering all those WhatsApps. Okay, cool. So same question over to you, Bridgine. What are you going to do?
Well, basically, I think the most important thing is this, as Gavin said, to show them the vision, especially of where Payment Sense are going and with Dojo moving down the line. Get them to earn money very quickly, because there's nothing better than getting a taste of it to get them to buy into it. Use the poster boys within your team of showing, this can be you. I think the emphasis on building a residual income and, you know, showing them how quickly that can grow with putting sales on. I also think sort of, I see like where we're going in the future, that we were going to become a more product driven sale than a cost driven sale. So, you know, sort of things like, you know, getting them, I find with newbies, one of the hardest things is like sort of to get them to get away from, you know, going to the floor and everything, you know, get it into the head. We're selling a Rolls Royce. If they want a Fiesta, let them go to WorldPay, you know, and sell the product as opposed to the price, and show them that, you know, sort of don't be a busy fool. As in, you know, why run around and saying 40 customers for 500 LTR when you can get quality customers, and sort of start setting our expectations higher, and just don't sort of, you know, my experience and over the years has always been is that the customers that you do the more for, you know, the little small customer who you feel sorry for and you give a really, really good deal that makes you nothing, they just turn into a nightmare because they torture you forever. I mean, if their bill's 2p more than what they thought it was going to be. Whereas you get a big customer, you know, they know that the customer services, they phone them, they don't phone you. So I think it's all around that. But the most important thing is selling them fishing and getting them to earn money quickly are the two vital things.
Yeah. So you're right. So building on Gavin's where he was talking about communication and role modeling, kind of vision and expectations, and kind of driving it forward as well.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So same question to you then, Matt.
Yeah, I agree with the other guys. I mean, ultimately, we need to get these guys engaged as soon as possible. Field-based trainers do a great job, as I touched on earlier. I'll always try and get my new guys out with an experienced guy within the first couple of days as well, so they get an idea of the level they need to get at fairly quickly. Sell them that journey. Steve talks about hearts and minds a lot, and he's absolutely right. That's really the how we need to sell it to the new guys. But I think, you know, it's going to be interesting the next few months. I suspect or hope there could be a change. I think when did I start? October 2018. I think I've only had one person come on board with industry experience, and I suspect that might change in the next few months. So that kind of might help make that a little bit easier in terms of engagement, because people will understand the earning potential. But it's definitely, you know, the first 2-3 weeks we need to get these people engaged. We need to sell them the journey, explain the money and the, you know, the benefits and how much money these guys can earn in the first few months. And then we progress, we go into dojo, super pay, etc. Tons and tons of good stuff to look forward to. But it's about getting the guys, as B said, earning money fairly quickly, so that they engage and then progress, you know, through those communities.
Brilliant. Cool. Thank you, Matt. Okay, so final question for the session. If anyone does have any questions, by all means, pop them into the chat box as well. We'll try and get a couple answered. But the final question from me then is kind of our leaving remarks. We always do this in the session. So I'm going to ask each of you to just tell us, for anyone that's new to management, or that they're dealing with different and maybe difficult personalities in their team, what piece of advice would you give to them on how to kind of approach it? So let's start with you, Gavin. What advice would you give?
My biggest thing is just build trust with your team very quick, get them to buy into you. And then any situations that arise from that, you've got that trust, you've got that loyalty. The team have bought into you, so you can then manage any awkward situations or any big personalities from there. And yeah, it just makes it a lot easier, and they're going to kind of accept what you say because they've got that trust within you.
Brilliant, thank you. And same question to you, Bridgine.
Yeah, it's all about sort of the most important thing, as Gavin says, is trust. It's getting to know your team. The first thing you want to bin is, you know, one size fits all does not work at all. You have to know that your team is individuals, and the best way to get the best out of them is, you know, it's that old sort of thing, make them think it's their idea rather than your idea. So, you know, if you can get them going to achieve what they want, you will get what you want as a byproduct of that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Think of them as individuals, and it will all drive it forward. Okay, so Matt, same question to you then.
Yeah, echoing everything you know, B and Gav have said. manage as individuals, make sure you build that trust within your team, don't shy away from conflict, and as we touched on earlier, don't take things personally.
Great, thank you. Okay, cool. So just to finish up then the final part of this, I just want to show you a couple of resources, as we always do, on what you can use to kind of drive your team forward. I'm just going to share my screen, which should be on this one, and how to look at personality. So personality profiling, if you're into it, great. If you're not, don't worry, but there's a few good ones out there. Myers-Briggs is the one that I kind of touched on in this session. There's Print, there's Insights. There's a really good free one to get started with if you want to find out about your own personality test as well. It's called 16personalities.com. But it allows you to kind of understand the motivators, the values, what drives people, what doesn't, and what kind of approach they have. There's 1 Minute Manager. It's a book by Ken Blanchard. Ken Blanchard does a lot around leadership. It's a really, really quick read. So he does a series of books that are 20 minutes to read back to back. And it just talks about kind of how to get the best out of people and deal with different personalities. And then there's a great course on LinkedIn Learning called Managing Teams. So you've all got access to that. So now we're in total, but it's a series of individual modules or individual videos. You can go in and pick the part that you want to have a look at. But again, it talks about personality types, and there's a lot more course than that, but this is the one that I really recommend for it. So thank you. Next week's session is going to be around leading change. So we're going to look at a couple of frameworks for change management. Particularly useful for now while we're going through our change and transition into superpay in the new world. But on that note, I just want to say thank you to Bridgine, to Matt and to Gavin for sharing their insights. Great session. Lots of stuff to take away from there, some really good tips and stuff on there. We're going to have this recording available on the Academy later today, so if you want to watch it back over, or if you want to send it to anyone, please do. But otherwise, thank you guys for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your Monday. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Sheila, can I ask you a quick question?